Okay guys, this steering module is from a 2005 BMW 645 Ci. I've got the active steering malfunction light illuminated. The steering wheel is cocked to the 11 o'clock position and the DSC light is illuminated. So everything I've heard is it's the steering angle sensor that's the issue. Now in this video I've skipped past removing the steering wheel and the steering column covers and airbag because there's lots and lots of videos on YouTube that show you how to do that. If you'd like me to add that at a later date, I'll be happy to do so. But just a couple of tricks that I've learned that I haven't seen in any of the other videos. When you remove the steering wheel from this location, you'll then have a cowl in front. There's three plastic pieces. This is the lower plastic piece below the steering wheel column. There's a top piece, which I don't have in front of me, and then there's which goes right here. The piece I just showed you here goes right here. Then there's a front piece that goes right like this. Once you have the steering wheel removed, you pull off the first cover here. That comes right off. There's no attachments or screws to play with. This bottom piece then has a plastic screw and an insert. And be very, very careful. These screws are so soft that they are very easily stripped. Here's an insert. This insert goes in the bottom this way of this component right here, and it fits into this little square on this metal housing. There's a little bit of plastic that I had to snap off because that screw did strip out on me. For the top cowling, there are two more pieces or openings where those plastic screws go, there and there. And typically you'll unscrew the plastic screws, and then you have to remove the bottom and top cowl, or at least loosen them enough and separate them. At least the top one has to be separated from this metal housing. In fact, just detach both of them, because once you've done that, you can then pull this whole assembly off of the steering column enough to get to the back of it and disconnect two cables which are color-coded. So once that's done, you now can bring it into your workshop and have it placed just like I have it. Then it's about the disassembly. Now, what you'll see here is these holes. There's three screw holes. I've disassembled this so it'd be easier for me to film. There's three screw holes right here. 1, 2, 3. And they have to line up. You'll see they're lined up obviously before you remove them. I've already done it, so I'm trying to keep them lined up for the video. Remove those three screws, and that'll allow you to remove this whole assembly. It also gets you to the step where you can now do the first part of the disassembly of the unit. This is your clock spring, this plastic piece here. It is not your sensor. So you want to remove this, and it's held in place with two plastic clips. I'll see if I can zoom in. Now, you want to make sure you look at the orientation properly. There's a steel or a metal shaft right here. It goes right where my finger is. So make a note of that, because when you do that, it also then aligns the clips on the inside that maintains this clock spring in its position. Now, I'm going to show you where those clips are located. There's one clip here where this little rectangular opening is. If you go on the inside, you'll see the plastic tab. You just want to pull that tab away from the metal and keep it away, and then you do the same thing here. Now what I did is I went inside this way with a flathead screwdriver and just gently pried it out there and right there. And then I was able to raise this whole unit off. Okay, and these are very specific relative to this pin, so it's very easy to locate these tabs to remove this clock spring. So now I'm going to pull this clock spring off because I've already depressed those tabs, and I'm going to set it aside. You do not want to take this apart. There's a ribbon in here, and it can just become an absolute mess and nightmare if you take it apart. Just leave it, just look it over, make sure there's no dirt or anything foreign that shouldn't be around it. And then what you're left with is the sensor assembly itself. There's a plastic ring right here. You want to be very careful not to damage this. This shape right here of the steel housing is the part that goes around where the key for this particular model goes. So the next thing you want to do is you want to remove a plastic retaining clip right here that holds this metal assembly in place. That metal assembly actually rotates, and it has brushes on it that actually pick up a signal from where my finger is now. This track looking, these 3 rings, they're actually the tracking device that the brushes rub on for the sensor. So the first thing you want to do is remove this ring. On the underside of it, I'm going to pull this ring out. See if we can get it out. You'll see there's 3 hoops. There's one hoop, there's another one, and there's another one. All these do is clip in against a ridge in the metal housing. So you want to very gently from the underside flip this whole device upside down and just push these clips away from the ridge and then push it out that way. And just pull this whole component out and set it aside. Once you've done that, this rotational metal assembly, which is the bearing and the brushes, can now be prized off of the shaft upon which they sit. Now, you don't want to pry against this plastic ring here because that can damage it. The best thing to do is to take a flathead screwdriver against this metal piece here and use that as your fulcrum point, so you're not using it as the plastic, and press up. Then rotate and do it again, a little bit at a time until it pops off. Now, in another video that I saw, the whole assembly came off with the bearing. In my instance, I'll show you. In my instance, this piece came off first, which is the housing. And we'll talk about that in another second or so. I'll set that aside for a second. Then the bearing, I was able to pry off too. Okay, so that's these could have come off in separate parts. So if they do, the correct way to put this back is these ball bearings should be exposed when you put it back in the housing, like so. Okay, you can see the ball bearings there, as opposed to no ball bearings there. So you want to make sure the ball bearings are exposed down on that shaft, or just place it into this assembly and then place the whole assembly on together. Okay, now typically what the problem is there's dirt along these rings, so I just cleaned them with some isopropyl alcohol and made sure there was no lint whatsoever left in them. And then the other problem that I've seen in some of the other videos, one of the gentlemen said you'll notice that there's 2 pairs of brushes. There's one pair of brushes and there's another pair of brushes. On one gentleman's car, one of the tips of these brushes had snapped off. Mine look like they're in pretty good shape. So what I've done is I've just taken these tabs, these brass tabs, and I bent them away from the shaft. I pushed them that way so that they would have more tension and contact on the plate itself, this plate right here. So once you've done that, it's just a case of reassembly. You place the bearing back in the housing. I'm not going to do that right now just for simplicity, but what I am going to do is just place this piece back loosely so you can get an idea of how that goes. And then this is where the proper orientation for this is important, for this clock spring. This is the hole that goes over that shaft, and then everything else will align. So bring this over and lay it like so. And once you've done that, you want to align the screw holes like so. 1, 2, and 3. And once you've done that, you're then ready to begin reassembly. Obviously, you want to put the plastic ring back in place. The bearing has to go back in place beforehand. Then this component, this whole assembly, slides back on to the steering shaft. You insert these 3 screws, and you begin reassembly with your controls for your turn signals and cruise control and those sorts of things. Then you can put the cowling back on. And remember, when you do the cowling, you want to make sure you have 2 of these inserts in the top to receive the top plastic screws, and then 1 of these in the bottom goes in the metal here to receive the underside of the cowling, which will be, the screw will go through this, then through this pressed piece, which is in the metal housing. Then it's just a simple question of reinstalling the steering wheel and clipping the airbag and connectors back into place. Thank you very much. If you like this or want some further information, please don't hesitate to contact me.